Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. The future of Egypt's peace deal with Israel now hinges entirely on the issue of Palestinian refugees. Egyptian officials are reportedly telling their Israeli counterparts, quote, if even one Palestinian refugee crosses over, the peace agreement will be nullified, end quote. That comes in response to IDF military plans to go from the southern Gazan city of Khan Yunis to Rafah, which is where Hamas still has a stronghold. It's also where Egypt controls its only border crossing with Gaza. The tense situation has our next guest asking if Biden's disastrous foreign policy will lead to Jimmy Carter's Camp David Accords becoming the latest casualty of his tumultuous time in office. Joining us now to discuss is national security researcher John Rosamondo. John, thanks for being here tonight. Can you talk to us about your concerns with Carter's Camp David Accords?
Well, let's put it this way. Jimmy Carter was arguably the worst president of the 20th century when it came to American prestige. Now we have Joe Biden, who is even worse. I mean, the one highlight of Carter's presidency was brokering the peace agreement between Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. But now, thanks to Joe Biden's effort to appease Iran, and that gave billions of dollars to the terror proxies around the region, and to Hamas, which used it to carry out the terror attacks, now we see the Camp David Accord about to potentially become unraveled thanks to Joe Biden's incompetence.
And if it were to unravel, how might that affect, I was going to say stability in the Middle East, but I mean, that sounds like an oxymoron at this point, especially under Biden and since the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. But how might that affect the power balance that we're seeing in the Middle East right now, especially with Iran and its proxies on the march?
Well, it's hard to say. The one thing I can say is that Egypt really despises the Iranians, despises the Islamists. One of the reasons that the Egyptians are so against having the Palestinian refugees in Sinai is because it views them as terrorists. The Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, and during the Sisi era, and I mean not the Sisi, they've gone after the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas has armed Muslim Brotherhood terrorists in Egypt. So you can see their concern.
And that was actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I did want to ask you about the fact that Egypt is so upset when it comes to the Palestinian refugee crisis that they're saying if they even catch wind of one trying to cross over their border and sneak into their nation, that could put an entire peace deal and decades of a peace agreement at risk. And of course, here in the U.S. and parts of Europe, we've got some Congress people like Rashida Tlaib trying to campaign to bring in who knows how many thousands of them into our nation. And yet in Egypt, they're saying not even one. So does that go back to what you're saying is the fear of a terror threat and also some of the conflicts that they have with Hamas?
Well, the Egyptians are like, if we end up having to take care of all these Gazans, it becomes our problem. It'll destabilize Egypt. I mean, Sisi is just coming out of nearly close to a decade of a Muslim Brotherhood terror campaign under the guise of ISIS in the Sinai that was armed and trained by Hamas from Gaza. So there's a lot of animosity there. And also the Egyptians dislike Netanyahu because they see him as a divisive figure who has prevented any sort of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And so it dislikes Hamas on one extreme and dislikes Netanyahu on the other.